I fell in love with your best friend and we are expecting a baby, my wife said. Then I turned the tables. Imagine losing everything you thought was real, your marriage, your best friend, and your entire sense of trust, all in one shattering revelation. This is the story of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate redemption. What would you do if your wife and your best friend ripped your world apart? Stay with me as we uncover the shocking truth and the jaw-dropping final move that turned the tables in a way no one saw coming. I had always believed that my life was something others envied, not because I was the richest man in the city or the flashiest, but because I had what most people spend a lifetime searching for: stability, love, and loyalty. I had built my world brick by brick, alongside my wife, Elena, the woman I had adored for 6 years, and my best friend, Grayson, the man who had stood beside me through every storm since college. I had it all: a thriving career as a financial strategist at one of the most prestigious investment firms in New York, a beautiful wife who had once looked at me as if I were her entire universe, and a best friend I trusted more than my own blood. And yet, looking back, I realized that my greatest mistake had been believing that these things would last forever. Because forever was a lie. Life had a way of making fools out of the unsuspecting. I was a man who prided himself on reading people, analyzing patterns, spotting deception. After all, it was part of my job to predict market fluctuations, to know when someone was bluffing in negotiations. But when it came to my own life, to the people closest to me, I had been blind. Perhaps it was because I never wanted to see the cracks, the small but insidious changes that, in hindsight, should have been warning signs flashing in front of my eyes. Maybe it was because I had trusted too deeply, loved too completely, and had never considered the possibility that my world was built on a foundation of betrayal. The first sign had been subtle, so small that I had brushed it off as nothing. Elena, who used to drape herself over me on the couch during our Friday night movie marathons, had started sitting at the far end, claiming she needed space. The text she once left me during the day, little notes about how much she missed me, how she couldn't wait to see me, became sporadic, then non-existent. Our conversations, once filled with warmth and laughter, had grown cold, mechanical, as if she were merely going through the motions of a marriage she no longer cared for. Then there was Grayson. Grayson, who had always been the first to grab a drink with me after work, the first to celebrate my successes, suddenly had excuses. Too busy, stuck at work, something came up. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, life got hectic, schedules clashed. But then, Grayson started avoiding me altogether, answering texts late, skipping our usual weekend basketball games. His excuses flimsy, almost rehearsed. The brotherhood we had shared for over a decade seemed to be unraveling. And yet, I told myself it was just life pulling us in different directions. I was wrong. I should have noticed the way Elena's phone, once carelessly left on the kitchen counter, was now always clutched tightly in her hands, notifications silenced. The way she started dressing up more than usual for late-night meetings, applying lipstick I hadn't seen her wear in years. The scent of cologne that wasn't mine, lingering on her clothes when she came home past midnight. The way she avoided my touch in bed, claiming she was exhausted, turning away when I reached for her. And yet, even with all these signs staring me in the face, I had convinced myself that I was overthinking things, that every couple went through phases. The moment of realization came like a slow, creeping shadow, one that started small but consumed everything in its path. I had been lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, waiting for Elena to come home. Midnight passed. Then 1 a.m. Then 2. No calls, no texts. When the front door finally creaked open, I remained still, pretending to be asleep as she tiptoed in, her heels in one hand, her hair slightly disheveled. My gut twisted. I wanted to believe that she had simply worked late, that she had fallen asleep at her desk. But deep down, I knew better. The way she hesitated in the doorway as if checking if I was awake, the way she exhaled softly in relief when she thought I wasn't, it told me everything. I had felt something inside me snap that night. I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every whisper of doubt I had ignored. And then, the next day, fate decided to show its cruel hand. A friend, one who didn't know about the turmoil clawing inside me, Mentioned something offhandedly over lunch. Saw Elena at the Four Seasons last night. She looked stunning. Man. Thought you two were having a date night. My blood ran cold. We hadn't been at the Four Seasons. I had been at home, waiting for her. She had said she was at work. My heart pounded against my ribs, a sickening mix of rage and realization washing over me. Still, I needed proof. I needed to be sure. That evening, I made a decision. I went to our shared closet, pulling down the box of old memories, the one filled with pictures, love letters, mementos from our travels. I sifted through them, staring at the smiling faces frozen in time. A cruel joke. Then, with a deep breath, I set my phone down, turned on the recording app, and dialed Grayson. It rang. And rang. And then Grayson answered. "Hey, man." Grayson's voice came through, casual, unsuspecting. I forced my own to remain steady. "Hey, just calling to check in. Haven't seen you in a while." A pause. Barely a second, but it was there. "Yeah. Sorry, things have been crazy at work." Another lie. Another hesitation. I clenched my jaw. "Yeah. I bet. Listen, I was thinking we should grab a drink tomorrow. Like old times." Grayson exhaled, forced a chuckle. "Man, I'd love to, but I've got plans with someone." There it was. The final nail in the coffin. Grayson's grip on the phone tightened, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. "Right. Someone. You mean my wife?" Silence. A silence so thick, so damning, that I felt like I was suffocating in it. Then, a sharp intake of breath from the other end. "Gray." I hung up. The phone slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. My chest felt like it was caving in, a hurricane of emotions ripping through me. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, and beneath it all, something cold and calculating. I had spent years building a life with Elena, years trusting Liam. And now, in a matter of seconds, it was all gone. But I wasn't a man who crumbled. No. If they thought they had broken me, if they thought they could take everything from me and walk away unscathed, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Because I wasn't just going to sit back and accept defeat. I was going to destroy them. And when I was done, they would wish they had never crossed me. I sat in my car that night, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The streetlights cast eerie shadows through the windshield, flickering across my face as my mind replayed the phone call with Liam over and over again. I had hoped that there was some other explanation, some rational, twisted, improbable way this wasn't what it seemed. But the silence on the other end of the line had told me everything. The hesitation, the forced laugh, the way Liam's voice had faltered when I mentioned my wife. There was no denying it now. My best friend and my wife had betrayed me. And the worst part? They hadn't even tried to hide it well. They had left breadcrumbs, obvious signs, as if they had never feared getting caught. Maybe because they thought I was too blind, too trusting, too much of a fool to ever suspect them. A bitter laugh escaped me, cold and sharp. They had underestimated me. That much was clear. The air in the car felt suffocating, thick with the weight of realization, so I forced myself to breathe, to think, to strategize. I wasn't going to confront them in a fit of rage, screaming accusations, demanding explanations like some pathetic, broken-hearted husband. No. That would be playing right into their hands. They would twist it, manipulate the narrative, gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid, insecure. I had seen men go through it before, friends who had caught their wives cheating only to end up the villains in their own stories, painted as controlling, overbearing, or worse, delusional. Not me. I was not a man who lost. I had built my career on calculated risks, on knowing when to strike, when to hold back, when to let my opponents think they had the upper hand, before flipping the board entirely. And this was just another game. Only this time, the stakes were personal. My first move had to be patience. As much as my blood boiled, as much as every fiber of my being screamed at me to storm into their little affair, and tear it apart with my bare hands. I had to wait. I had to watch. I needed evidence not just for myself, but to ensure that when I struck, it would be absolute. The next morning, I forced myself to act normal. I woke up, showered, dressed in my usual tailored suit, and walked into the kitchen where Elena stood, pouring coffee into her favorite mug, the one I had bought for her on our honeymoon in Santorini. She looked up, gave me a tight-lipped smile, nothing like the soft, sleepy grin she used to greet me with. "Morning," she murmured. I studied her, memorizing every detail. The way she avoided my eyes. The way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous tick I'd once found endearing, now a glaring red flag. "Morning," I replied, voice even, calm. I took a sip of my own coffee, watching as she scrolled through her phone, fingers tapping quickly. A faint smile ghosting her lips. I knew who she was texting. My stomach twisted, but my face remained unreadable. Instead, I leaned against the counter, casually reaching for my own phone. "Hey, what's your schedule like tonight? Thought we could do dinner, maybe at that Italian place you love." Elena stiffened for the briefest second, so quick that most people wouldn't have noticed. But I wasn't most people. She tucked her phone into her pocket, turning to face me with a forced expression of regret. "Oh, I wish I could, babe, but I have a late meeting. Big client." "Right. Another meeting." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider it. "That's too bad," I said, setting my cup down. "You've been working late a lot these days." She hesitated again, just a flicker of it, before her features smoothed into something resembling nonchalance. "Yeah, it's been crazy. You know how it is." I did. Just not in the way she thought. Instead of pressing, I let it go, pushing off the counter and pressing a kiss to her temple like I always did before leaving for work. She barely reacted, and that alone told me more than words ever could. At the office, I went through the motions, taking meetings, answering emails, all while my mind worked like a well-oiled machine, piecing together my next steps. That evening, instead of going home, I parked a block away from the Grand Meridian, a boutique hotel nestled in the heart of downtown. It was discreet, upscale, the kind of place people use when they didn't want to be seen. At precisely 8:47 p.m., I saw her. Elena stepped out of a cab, glancing over her shoulder before slipping inside. Less than 2 minutes later, Liam followed, wearing a navy blazer. I had seen him wear 100 times before. They didn't even try to stagger their arrival. Arrogant, careless. I exhaled slowly, gripping the steering wheel to steady myself. The rage threatened to consume me, but I couldn't let it, not yet. I snapped a few photos not because I needed them, but because it was the beginning of my game, a record of their downfall. For the next few weeks, I watched. I listened. I gathered. Every late night Elena claimed to be at the office, every cancelled plan Liam made with me, every whispered excuse, it all became data, proof. I tracked their movements, their habits. When Liam cancelled our usual Friday night drinks, I already knew why. I had already seen the reservation under Liam's name at a rooftop bar, the same one I had once taken Elena to for our anniversary. The irony wasn't lost on me. Through it all, I remained cold, calculated, never letting either of them see my growing knowledge. I played my role perfectly, the oblivious husband, the best friend who was too busy to notice. But then, something unexpected happened. One night, as I was sitting at my desk, scrolling through records, a notification popped up, a message from an unknown number. "Victoria Hayes, we need to talk." About Liam. My pulse kicked up. Victoria, Liam's ex. The woman he had dumped 3 months ago without explanation. I responded immediately. "What do you know?" Her reply came within seconds. "Not here. Meet me at Haven Cafe. 10 p.m. No questions." I stared at the screen, then at the clock. 9:23 p.m. I grabbed my coat. 15 minutes later, I walked into the dimly lit cafe, eyes scanning the booths until I spotted her. Victoria was stunning in that sharp, effortless way, dark auburn hair, piercing blue eyes that looked up at me with something close to amusement as she sipped her wine. "Grayson Bennett," she said, setting down her glass. "I was wondering when you'd finally put the pieces together." I slid into the seat across from her. "You said you had something on Liam." She smirked, leaning in. "I have more than something. I have everything." My jaw tightened. "Go on." Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling before turning the screen toward me. The first image was of Liam. Not with Elena. With another woman. Then another. And another. I forced myself to stay calm, controlled, as I studied the evidence. "He's a serial cheater," Victoria said, voice dripping with contempt. Elena isn't the first. And trust me, she won't be the last. Something dark, something dangerous curled inside me. Elena thought she had won. Liam thought he was untouchable. They were both about to learn how wrong they were. Things are about to take a turn they didn't see coming. But before we reveal what happens next, I want to hear from you. Do you think my plan will succeed, or will Liam find a way to claw his way out? Comment 11 in the comments if you think I have this in the bag. Comment 2222 if you think Liam might fight back. I stared at the screen, my mind moving a mile a minute as I processed what Victoria had just shown me. Liam wasn't just a liar, a backstabbing traitor, he was a serial cheater. Elena wasn't special. Wasn't some grand love story he had thrown everything away for. She was just another in a long line of women Liam had played. And she had no idea. That realization hit me harder than I expected. All this time, I had been preparing for the inevitable confrontation, imagining Elena standing beside Liam. The two of them united in their betrayal, smug in their certainty that they had won. But now I saw it for what it was. Liam wasn't committed to Elena any more than he had been to Victoria, or the nameless women in the photos. He was playing her, just like he had played everyone else. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table as I forced myself to stay composed. Victoria watched me, a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. "So, what's the plan, Bennett?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "You gonna tell her?" I scoffed. "Not yet." Victoria smirked, leaning back against the booth. "Smart. Let her find out the hard way." I nodded, my mind already forming the next step. Telling Elena now would be too easy. She would deny it, defend Liam, tell herself that I was just trying to get inside her head. No, she needed to see it with her own eyes. She needed to feel the same devastation, the same gut-wrenching betrayal. Only then would she understand. Only then would she break. For the next few days, I continued playing the role of the oblivious husband. I went to work, I came home, I smiled when necessary, all while keeping a close eye on everything. I already knew Elena was sneaking off to see Liam every chance she got. But now, I paid attention to the details: how long she stayed out, how often she checked her phone, the way she came home looking restless, almost nervous. She thought she had everything under control. She thought she was winning. But I had an advantage. I knew something she didn't. The opportunity presented itself sooner than I expected. One evening, as Elena was getting ready, she glanced at me through the mirror. "I'm meeting Claire for dinner," she said, casually, running a brush through her dark waves. I hummed, taking a sip of my bourbon. "Oh yeah? Where at?" She hesitated just for a second, just enough for someone who was looking to notice. Then she smiled. "That new sushi place downtown." Lie. Claire had left for Miami 2 days ago. I set my glass down, nodding as if I believed her. "Sounds fun." She gave me another smile, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek before grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up," she added, walking toward the door. "Oh, I wouldn't." The moment she was gone, I grabbed my keys and followed. I already knew where she was going. Pulling into the parking garage of the Grand Meridian. The first positioned myself in a spot where I had a clear view of the entrance but remained unseen. Less than 15 minutes later, a black luxury sedan pulled up. Liam stepped out first, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his usual cocky smirk in place as he walked around to open the door for Elena. She emerged, laughing softly, slipping her hand into his as they made their way inside. I sat back, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. There it was. The confirmation. The proof. I could end it right now if I wanted to. I could storm in there, confront them, watch their faces crumble as they realized they had been caught. But that wasn't good enough. I needed more. I needed to make sure when I struck, there would be no escape, no damage control, no way for them to twist the story. I waited. 47 minutes later, Liam and Elena emerged from the hotel, looking just as composed as when they had entered. They lingered on the sidewalk, talking, laughing, completely unaware that they were being watched. Then Liam leaned in, brushing a slow, deliberate kiss against her lips. She melted into it, gripping his lapel, looking up at him like he was the center of her world. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. The audacity, the shamelessness. I snapped a photo. Then another. Then I put the car in drive and left. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, the glow of my laptop illuminating the whiskey in my glass as I compiled every piece of evidence I had gathered. Photos, text logs, surveillance timestamps. A timeline so airtight there would be no room for doubt. And then, I prepared for the next move. 2 days later, I executed. Elena had been glowing that morning, humming to herself as she moved around the kitchen. "We should take a weekend trip," she mused, sipping her coffee. "Maybe Napa?" I looked at her, wondering how she could sit there, acting like everything was fine, like she wasn't sleeping with my best friend behind my back. "Sounds good," I said smoothly. She smiled. "I'll check flights later." I nodded, finishing the last of my coffee before grabbing my phone. "Oh, by the way, I sent something to your email. You should check it." Elena frowned, setting her mug down. "Now?" "Yeah." Curious, she wiped her hands on a napkin and reached for her phone, tapping into her inbox. I watched her expression as she clicked the email, her eyes scanning the content. Then I saw it. The moment it hit her. Her face drained of color, her fingers trembling as she scrolled. What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. "What's wrong?" She looked up at me, eyes wide with horror. This isn't real." "Oh, it's real," I said calmly, setting my phone down. "Hotel records, photos, text logs, surveillance footage, time-stamped receipts. Want me to print it out for you?" Elena's breathing turned shallow. You were spying on me?" I laughed, cold and sharp. "Spying? No, sweetheart. I was catching you. Big difference." She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "Grayson, please, don't," I cut in, my voice devoid of emotion. "Don't insult me by lying to my face. I know everything." Her lips parted, but no words came out. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, she looked small, defeated, caught. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small USB drive, and placing it on the table between us. "Inside that," I said, my tone eerily calm, "is everything. Every conversation. Every hotel visit. Every lie you told. It's backed up in 5 different places, so don't bother trying to delete it. Now, here's what's going to happen." Elena swallowed hard. "You're going to pack your things and leave," I continued. "You're going to tell everyone it was your decision. And you're going to keep Liam out of my sight. Because if I ever see him again, I won't be as calm as I am right now." She blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what was happening. "Grayson, please," I stood abruptly, grabbing my keys. "You have until the end of the day." Then, without another word, I walked out, leaving her sitting there broken, exposed, drowning in the truth she had so desperately tried to hide. And I wasn't done yet. Because Liam was next. I stepped out of the house, the morning air crisp against my skin, but I barely felt it. My pulse pounded in my ears, my thoughts spiraling in 1,000 directions at once. I had done it. I had ripped the mask off, shattered the illusion, exposed Elena for what she truly was. But now, as I walked to my car, my hands trembled slightly. I gritted my teeth, flexing my fingers to steady them. No, I wouldn't break, not yet. Not in front of her. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel so hard it should have cracked beneath my fingers, and took a long, shuddering breath. My reflection in the rearview mirror stared back at me cold, empty, a stranger in my own skin. For years, I had built my life around a woman who had never truly belonged to me. I had given her everything: my love, my trust, my devotion, only to realize she had never valued it. Never valued me. The weight of that truth settled deep in my chest, an unbearable pressure threatening to crush me from the inside out. My marriage, the life I had meticulously crafted, was over. Not in the slow, inevitable way relationships sometimes faded, but in the most brutal, unceremonious fashion. One moment I had a wife, a home, a future, and the next, I was a man sitting in an empty car, staring at the wreckage of everything I thought was real. I started the engine, not knowing where I was going, only that I had to move. If I sat still, the reality of it all would consume me whole. The city blurred past me in streaks of gray and gold as I drove, my grip ironclad on the wheel. I should feel relief. I had exposed her. I had the upper hand. So why did I feel like I was suffocating? I pulled into an empty parking lot, the quiet hum of streetlights flickering above as the world moved on without me. I pressed my palms against my face, exhaling sharply, but it did nothing to quell the storm raging inside me. I had expected anger, rage, but instead, there was just nothing. A hollow, gaping void where my heart used to be. I had spent years believing in a lie, fighting for a woman who had been giving herself to someone else. And now, without that fight, without her, what was left? My phone buzzed beside me, pulling me from the depths of my thoughts. A text. Victoria, you okay? I let out a bitter chuckle. Was I okay? What a ridiculous question. I wasn't okay. I was unraveling. Instead of answering, I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, staring blankly at the windshield. I felt detached. Like I was watching someone else live this moment, like my body was here, but my mind was drifting somewhere far beyond it. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time lost all meaning. At some point, I found myself at a bar. I wasn't sure how I got there, but the burn of whiskey down my throat was the only thing grounding me. The place was nearly empty, the low hum of music barely registering in my ears. I kept drinking, one glass after another, trying to drown out the images looping in my mind. Elena laughing with Liam, her body pressed against his, the way she had looked at him with something close to adoration. That used to be mine. That used to be our life. Rough night? The bartender asked, sliding me another drink. I let out a dry laugh. You could say that. The bartender nodded knowingly, as if he had seen men like me before, men trying to drink away the ghosts of a love that no longer belonged to them. I downed another shot, the liquid scorching my throat, but it didn't make the pain go away. Nothing would. I thought about going home, but the idea of walking back into that house, of seeing her things still there, the remnants of our life together scattered across every surface, made my stomach turn. No, I couldn't go back. Not yet. So I stayed. By the time I left the bar, the sky had shifted to a deep navy, the air carrying the bite of approaching winter. I stumbled slightly, cursing under my breath as I leaned against my car. My head swam, the alcohol numbing the edges of my grief, but not enough to erase it. I pressed my forehead against the cool metal, eyes squeezing shut. This wasn't me. I was stronger than this. But damn if it didn't feel like my entire world had just imploded. The next morning, I woke up to a pounding headache, and a bitter taste in my mouth. Sunlight slashed through the curtains of the unfamiliar hotel room I had rented at some point during the night. My suit was wrinkled, my tie discarded on the floor. I sat up slowly, head throbbing, the events of the past 24 hours crashing into me all over again. My phone buzzed again. Another text. Victoria, I found something. Call me. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. My fingers hovered over the dial button before I finally pressed it. I answered on the first ring. Took you long enough. Not in the mood for small talk, Victoria. My voice was hoarse, rough from the whiskey and the weight of sleepless hours. What did you find? There was a pause. Then, Liam's company. It's worse than I thought. He's in deep trouble. Gray. Like, real trouble. I ran a hand through my hair, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. How bad? Bad enough that if the right people find out, he's done. A slow exhale. The pieces were shifting, the game changing. Liam had taken everything from me. My wife, my trust, my peace. But now, I had something that could take everything from him in return. For the first time in days, something flickered in my chest. Not pain. Not grief. Purpose. I had been drowning, spiraling, losing myself in the wreckage of what was, but not anymore. I straightened, my expression hardening. Send me everything you have. Victoria let out a low chuckle. Knew you'd come around. I ended the call, gripping the phone tightly. This wasn't over. Not even close. I sat in the dimly lit hotel room, the screen of my phone casting an eerie glow on my face as I scrolled through the files Victoria had sent. My mind, once drowning in grief, now burned with singular focus. The numbers, the reports, the transactions. Liam's company wasn't just in trouble. It was on the verge of collapse. The man who had stolen my wife, who had paraded his betrayal in plain sight, was bleeding money faster than he could cover it up. Investors were pulling out, Deals were falling through, and if the right pressure was applied, Liam Parker would lose everything. And I intended to be the one to push him over the edge. I took a slow breath, steadying my pulse. I had spent the past few days wallowing in self-destruction, but that was over now. The storm inside me had settled, shifting from chaos to something far more dangerous: calculated vengeance. I wasn't just going to take Liam down. I was going to dismantle him, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but regret. My phone buzzed again. Victoria, so, you in? I exhaled sharply, my fingers tightening around the device. I had no reason to trust Victoria, but she had as much to lose as I did. Liam had played us both for fools, had made us collateral damage in his selfish games. The difference was, I wasn't content with just walking away. I needed Liam to suffer. I typed back, meet me at the Lockwood, 9 p.m. don't be late. Hours later, I walked into the upscale bar, the scent of whiskey and leather thick in the air. Victoria was already there, sitting in a secluded booth, a glass of red wine in her manicured hand. She looked up as I approached, a slow smirk tugging at her lips. Knew you'd come around, she mused, taking a sip. I slid into the seat across from her, leveling her with a hard stare. Tell me everything. Victoria leaned forward, her expression shifting from amusement to something far more serious. She pulled out her phone, swiping through a set of documents before placing it on the table between us. Liam's company is a sinking ship. He's leveraged beyond belief, faking profit margins to keep investors from running. He's been using short-term loans to cover long-term liabilities. And if he doesn't secure another major investment soon, he's done. I studied the data, my sharp eyes absorbing every detail. Who's keeping him afloat right now? Victoria tapped the screen. A guy named Robert Langston, hedge fund manager. He's got a lot of money tied up in Liam's company, but if he gets even the slightest whiff that things aren't what they seem, he'll pull out. I nodded slowly, already seeing the path laid out before me. Then we make sure he gets that whiff. Victoria grinned. I like the way you think. I set the phone down, meeting her gaze. Why are you helping me? Her smile faltered for a second, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. Because I loved him once. And I hate that I did. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. I was supposed to marry that man, Grayson. We had a future. At least, I thought we did. But then one day, he wakes up and decides I'm not enough. No warning, no explanation, just moves on like I was nothing. Like I never existed. Her eyes darkened. And now, he gets to play house with your wife, acting like he's won? I watched her take another sip, her jaw tightening. No, he doesn't get to win. I studied her for a moment. There was no pity in my expression, only understanding. I knew that feeling all too well. The gut-wrenching moment when you realize the person you built your life around was never truly yours. That the love you believed in was nothing more than an illusion. I reached for my glass, lifting it slightly. Then let's make sure he loses. Victoria clinked her wine against my whiskey. Now we're talking. We spent the next hour mapping out our plan. Step 1 was planting the right rumors in the right ears. I had connections in the financial world, people who trusted my instincts. If I started asking the right questions, subtly casting doubt on Liam's company, the whispers would spread. Victoria, with her extensive network in media and PR, would ensure that those whispers turned into something impossible to ignore. Step 2 was hitting Liam where it hurt the most: his reputation. I had seen it time and time again in my industry. When confidence in a man's ability to lead started to crumble, everything else followed. Investors panicked, clients fled, and soon enough, the entire empire collapsed under the weight of its own deception. And step 3, the final blow, we would make sure Liam had no way out. By the time I left the bar that night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: control. I was no longer drowning, no longer at the mercy of my emotions. I had a purpose, a goal, and soon, I would have justice. The next morning, I walked into my office, my usual composure fully restored. I greeted my assistant, reviewed my calendar, and then, with meticulous precision, began making my calls. By noon, the first seeds of doubt had been planted. By evening, they had begun to sprout. Liam didn't know it yet, but his downfall had already started. That night, Victoria sent me a message. Victoria, check the business forums. People are talking. I clicked the link, scanning the discussions. Investors were growing restless. Analysts were questioning inconsistencies in Liam's financial reports. A few journalists had even started sniffing around, their curiosity piqued by sudden fluctuations in stock prices. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. Good. The next day, things escalated. Liam's company held a shareholders meeting. And from the reports I received, it hadn't gone well. People were demanding answers, pressing for clarification on missing funds, unstable forecasts. Liam had tried to reassure them, had spun his usual charm, but cracks were starting to show. And cracks had a way of becoming fractures. That evening, as I sat in my car, watching the world move around me, my phone buzzed again. Elena, we need to talk. I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. She had finally realized something was wrong, but she had no idea just how much worse it was going to get. I stared at the text from Elena, my pulse steady, my expression unreadable. We need to talk. The irony of it nearly made me laugh. For weeks, she had lied, snuck around behind my back, looked me in the eyes, and fed me nothing but deception. And now that her world was beginning to tremble, now that she felt the ground shifting beneath her, she wanted to talk? No, she didn't deserve my time. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I locked my phone and slid it into my pocket, stepping out of my car and into the crisp evening air. The city pulsed around me, honking cabs, the hum of conversations from passing pedestrians, the distant wail of a siren, but I barely registered any of it. My mind was focused on only one thing, making sure Liam Parker lost everything. My first move had already been executed flawlessly. The whispers about Liam's company had spread faster than wildfire. Doubt was an infection, and once it took root in the minds of investors, it was only a matter of time before panic set in. But I wasn't done. If Liam was smart, he was scrambling now, making desperate calls, trying to plug the leaks before they turned into a flood. He wouldn't know where the attack was coming from. He'd suspect competitors, the market, maybe even bad luck, but he wouldn't suspect me. Not yet. The next phase of the plan had to be even more precise. Victoria had provided the blueprint, but now it was time for execution. I met her at an upscale cocktail lounge, tucked away in a quiet part of town, far from the usual places Liam and his associates frequented. Victoria was already there when I arrived, nursing a glass of red wine, her eyes flicking up as I slid into the seat across from her. "Tell me something good," she said, a smirk playing at her lips. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "The board is starting to fracture," I said evenly. "Langston hasn't pulled out yet, but he's asking questions. He's not going to like the answers." I arched a brow, swirling the wine in my glass. "And how do we make sure he gets those answers?" Grayson smirked. "We give them to him." I smiled wider. "That's what I like to hear." We spent the next hour mapping out our next steps. If Langston lost confidence, if he even suspected that Liam was manipulating financial reports, it would be the catalyst for total collapse. The problem was, Langston wasn't the kind of man to make impulsive decisions. He would need proof, solid, undeniable proof. That was where Victoria's connections came in. She knew people in the media, journalists who thrived on exposing corruption. A single leaked report, an article questioning Liam's leadership, and the cracks would deepen. And Grayson? He had spent years in the financial world. He knew exactly what numbers to highlight, which discrepancies would set off alarm bells. He would make sure those numbers found their way into the right hands. I leaned back, studying him. "You're different," I mused. He met my gaze, his expression unreadable. "How so?" I took a sip of my wine, tilting my head slightly. "When we first met, you were drowning in all this. Angry. Wrecked. Now," I smirked. "Now you look like a man who knows exactly what he's doing." Grayson exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "That's because I do." And he meant it. The days of grieving were over. He had spent enough time being the victim. Now, he was the one in control. The next morning, he set everything into motion. He made a call to a well-known financial analyst, someone whose word carried weight in the investment world. He played his part perfectly, feigning concern, subtly planting seeds of doubt. "I just don't know if Parker's numbers add up," he said, his voice calm, measured. "I'm hearing things, people are nervous." He let that statement hang, knowing full well that within hours, the analyst would be reaching out to his own sources, confirming suspicions that had been deliberately manufactured. Meanwhile, Victoria met with one of her contacts at a major business publication, passing along carefully curated reports. They didn't have to fabricate anything. Liam's financial records were already a disaster. All they had to do was shine a light on it. By midday, the first article went live. Is Parker Industries on shaky ground? Insiders express concerns about unstable financial structure. It wasn't a full takedown. Not yet. But it was enough to make people pay attention. I sat at my desk, watching the reactions unfold in real time. Calls were being made. Emails exchanged. By late afternoon, another article surfaced, this one more aggressive, questioning recent transactions that suggested Liam had been moving money around to hide losses. And then, the first domino fell. Langston pulled out. Not completely, at least, not yet. But he withdrew a portion of his investment, just enough to signal to other investors that something wasn't right. And once that doubt set in, it was only a matter of time before the rest followed. That evening, as I walked through my front door, my phone rang. Liam. I stared at the screen, my heart steady, my grip firm. I let it ring, let the moment stretch, let Liam feel the anxiety of waiting, of not knowing if I would answer. Then, just before it went to voicemail, I picked up. Grayson. Liam's voice was tight, controlled, but there was an edge to it, uncertainty, maybe even panic. We need to talk. I leaned against the counter, tilting my head slightly. Oh? About what? A pause. Just long enough for me to enjoy the silence. You've seen the news, Liam said finally. I have. I kept my voice neutral. Liam exhaled sharply. Listen, there's a lot of bullshit flying around right now. You know how the market works, one bad article, and people start losing their damn minds. I smirked, taking pleasure in Liam's discomfort. Sounds rough. Liam hesitated. I need to know if you've been hearing anything. From your people. I let the silence stretch, let Liam stew in his own paranoia. People talk, I said finally. You know that. Liam's breath hitched slightly. Yeah, they do. He forced a chuckle. Look, man, I know things have been weird between us lately, but we go way back. You'd tell me if something was coming, right? I gripped the phone tighter, my blood humming with quiet satisfaction. I could hear it now, the unease, the doubt, the knowledge that something was slipping through Liam's fingers. And he didn't know where the threat was coming from. I let out a slow exhale. Of course, Liam, I said smoothly. You'd be the first to know. Then I hung up. For a moment, I stood there, phone still in my hand, the weight of the moment settling over me. This was just the beginning. By the time I was done, Liam wouldn't just be worried. He'd be ruined. I leaned back in my chair, the dim glow of my office lamp casting long shadows across the room. My fingers tapped rhythmically against the armrest as I watched the financial news play out on the massive screen mounted on the wall. The headline scrolling across the bottom sent a pulse of satisfaction through my veins. Parker Industries, facing major investor exodus. Amidst financial concerns. It had begun. Over the past 48 hours, the cracks in Liam's empire had widened into deep fractures. After Langston pulled his initial investment, other investors followed suit, like sharks scenting blood in the water. Panic spread through the boardroom, through the company's top executives, through the very foundation. Liam had spent years building on lies. Clients withdrew deals, suppliers renegotiated contracts, and Parker Industries, once seen as an up-and-coming powerhouse, was suddenly a sinking ship with no lifeboats in sight. I smirked as I sipped my bourbon, the ice clinking softly against the glass. I had spent years calculating risks, predicting market movements, understanding the psychology of investors. I knew how easily confidence could be shaken, how fear spread faster than facts. And now, as I watched the chaos unfold, I knew Liam was scrambling, clawing at the edges of a cliff that had already begun to crumble beneath him. My phone buzzed. A message from Victoria. Victoria, you watching? I smirked, typing back. Every second. She responded instantly. Victoria, he's losing it. I have a friend inside Parker Industries. They said he locked himself in his office after the board meeting, yelling at everyone. I could picture it perfectly. Liam pacing behind his massive desk, barking orders, trying to salvage something that had already slipped through his fingers. He was arrogant, but arrogance wouldn't save him now. Another message came through. Victoria, tomorrow's the big one. Parker Industries earnings call. He has to face the investors publicly. He's screwed. I took another sip of my drink, my expression unreadable. I had spent the past few weeks orchestrating this moment, planting doubt, manipulating whispers into shouts. Tomorrow, it wouldn't just be whispers. It would be a public reckoning. The next morning, I arrived at my firm early, settling into my private conference room with a fresh cup of coffee. The room was silent except for the occasional click of my watch, as I checked the time. The earnings call was scheduled for 10 a.m. By 10:05, Liam's future would be sealed. I pulled up the live stream, the screen displaying a panel of Parker Industries executives, seated stiffly behind a long table. Liam sat at the center. His usual confident smirk replaced by something forced, something brittle. His suit was immaculate, his tie perfectly knotted, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers clenched slightly against the table. The moderator cleared his throat. Mr. Parker, given recent reports and investor concerns, can you clarify the company's financial position? Liam nodded, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Absolutely. There have been a lot of rumors, a lot of misinformation circulating. But let me be clear, Parker Industries is in a strong position. Our fundamentals are solid, and a voice cut in from the audience. Then why did Langston pull his funding? Liam faltered. Just for a second. But it was there. The moderator adjusted his mic. Mr. Parker? Liam's jaw tightened before he let out a short laugh. Look, investors make moves all the time. This isn't about our stability, it's about short-term market fluctuations. We're in the process of securing new partnerships as we speak. Another voice. This one sharper. Your last quarter's reports showed a significant discrepancy in projected revenue versus actual earnings. Can you explain the gap? My smirk deepened. That question had been carefully planted. Liam's fingers curled slightly into fists before he forced his hands to relax. Like I said, short-term fluctuations. Every company experiences. A third interruption. What about the reports that you've been shifting funds between accounts to cover losses? Silence. Liam's face tightened, his eyes darting toward the moderator, as if expecting an intervention. None came. The press smelled blood. Grayson leaned forward, relishing every second. I tried to recover, but the damage was already done. The moment I started dodging, the moment I failed to provide clear, confident answers, the narrative shifted completely. My words became meaningless background noise against the growing tide of skepticism, the undercurrent of doubt that was now fully exposed in the public eye. By the time the call ended, Parker Industries stock had dropped another 7%. By the end of the day, it had dropped 15%. And by the next morning, it was in freefall. I watched it all unfold from the comfort of my office, the glow of the financial news screen reflecting in my cold blue eyes. Liam was done. I leaned back, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. I had planned for this moment, imagined it, but now that it was here, it was almost underwhelming. My phone buzzed again. Victoria, stocks down 22%. He won't last the week. I exhaled slowly. Not long ago, I had been the one spiraling, the one drowning in heartbreak and betrayal. Now, I was the one pulling the strings. The irony was almost poetic. Another message. Victoria, Elena just pulled out all her shares. That made me pause. I hadn't expected that. I stared at the screen, my mind clicking through possibilities. She had been content riding Liam's wave, basking in the glow of her new life. But now? Now she was cutting ties? Interesting. I smirked. She had finally realized she backed the wrong man. Too bad for her. She was next. I sat in my office, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The weight of what I had done settled in my chest not as regret, but as something colder, sharper. Satisfaction. It had taken weeks of careful planning, of planting doubt, of orchestrating every whisper, every rumor, every perfectly timed move. And now, Parker Industries was in freefall. Liam was drowning, and no one was coming to save him. Not his board, not his investors, not even Elena. My phone buzzed on the desk. A call. Liam. I exhaled slowly, a smirk tugging at the corner of my lips. I let it ring, savoring the moment. Liam had spent months lying, deceiving, walking around with that arrogant smirk like he was untouchable. And now, he was desperate. He was the one chasing. He was the one afraid. On the fourth ring, I finally answered. Grayson. Man. Liam's voice was ragged, a stark contrast to the confident bravado he always carried. I need to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair, feigning disinterest. Oh? About what? A sharp exhale from the other end. You know damn well about what. I chuckled, swirling the whiskey in my glass. You sound stressed, Liam. A beat of silence. Then, the words came out fast, frantic. Look, I don't know what's going on, okay? I don't know who started all this, but everything is falling apart. My investors are pulling out, the stock is tanking, and he stopped, inhaling sharply, as if the admission itself was suffocating. I need your help. I let the moment stretch, enjoying the shift in power. Liam Parker, my former best friend, the man who had stolen my wife, who had laughed behind my back, was now begging me for help. I tilted my head. And why would I do that? Liam was silent for a moment, as if grappling with the reality of the situation. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, almost pleading. Because we've been through too much for you to just let me burn. I let out a slow, humorless laugh. You mean like how you let my marriage burn? Liam sucked in a breath. Come on, man. This is different. I tightened my grip around the glass. Different. I let the word linger, laced with incredulity. You spent a year lying to my face. You took everything I cared about, and now you expect me to help you? I wasn't thinking, okay? Liam's voice cracked, the cracks in his composure finally starting to show. I made mistakes. But this, Grayson, this is my entire life. If I lose Parker Industries, I lose everything. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my desk. And why exactly should I care? Silence. Liam's breathing was heavy, uneven. Because I know you, man. You're not cruel. I smirked, shaking my head. You never knew me at all. Liam made a sound something close to a desperate chuckle, but with no real humor behind it. Look, I don't need a miracle. Just help me stop the bleeding. A statement. A call to one of your contacts. Something. I just need time to fix this. I glanced at the TV screen across the room, where the latest news update scrolled beneath a live shot of Parker Industries headquarters. Parker Industries plunges 30%, financial collapse inevitable? Time? Liam didn't need time. He needed a miracle. And I had no intention of giving him one. I sighed dramatically. You know, Liam, there's something poetic about all this. Liam hesitated. What? I leaned back, staring at the ceiling for a moment before looking back at the city lights. You always thought you were smarter than everyone else. That you could lie, cheat, manipulate, and walk away without consequences. My voice was calm, measured. But now you're realizing what it feels like to lose everything. Just like I did. Liam let out a frustrated breath. Fine. You want an apology? I'm sorry, okay? No. I cut him off, my voice like steel. You're not sorry, Liam. You're just scared. Silence. Then, the desperation crept back into Liam's voice. I'll pay you. Whatever you want. Just help me make this go away. My laugh was low, dark. You think I need your money? I don't know, man. Liam stopped, inhaling sharply, as if trying to rein in his panic. Please. Don't let me go down like this. I stood, walking toward the window, looking down at the city below. You already went down, Liam. You just haven't hit the ground yet. A sharp, shaky breath from the other end. So that's it? You're just gonna let this happen? My smirk returned, but there was no warmth behind it. No, Liam. I took a slow sip of whiskey. I made this happen. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. And then Liam's voice, barely above a whisper. It was you. I let the words settle, let the realization sink in. Yes, I said simply. Liam cursed under his breath. You son of a click. I ended the call, setting my phone down with finality. Outside, the city buzzed, indifferent to the ruin of Liam Parker. and inside, I poured myself another drink. Justice had never tasted so sweet. I stood by my office window, the city lights stretching endlessly before me, a silent witness to the final act of my plan. The whiskey in my glass sat untouched, the ice melting into diluted amber, but I barely noticed. My mind was razor sharp, focused on the imminent destruction of Liam Parker. The call from Liam had been the final proof of his desperation, the last thread of a man unraveling at the seams. And now, I would make sure there was nothing left for him to cling to. My phone buzzed on my desk. Another text from Victoria. Victoria, SEC just launched an official investigation. It's over. I exhaled, a slow smirk forming. The final nail in the coffin. The Securities and Exchange Commission had taken notice. Liam had been shifting money between accounts, manipulating earnings, propping up a failing company with smoke and mirrors. And now? Now the authorities were involved. When fraud was suspected, it wasn't just a matter of reputation, it became legal. And no amount of scrambling, no desperate phone calls or last-ditch efforts would save him now. The plan had been perfect. The first cracks had been planted in the minds of investors. The whispers of financial instability had turned into loud, undeniable truths. Stockholders pulled out. Clients bailed. The press had swarmed like vultures, circling, waiting. And now, the government had stepped in to finish the job. I turned away from the window and picked up my phone, dialing a familiar number. Victoria answered on the first ring. "You see the news?" she asked, amusement dripping from her voice. I saw. My voice was even, calm, but there was a quiet satisfaction behind it. "What happens next?" She let out a soft chuckle. "Next? They freeze his assets, audit every transaction, and if they find what I think they will, prison time." I ran a hand through my hair, nodding slowly. "Good." There was a pause. Then Victoria's voice dropped slightly. "How does it feel?" I thought about that for a moment. How did it feel? To know that the man who had betrayed me, who had taken everything from me, was now moments away from losing everything himself. I let out a slow breath. "Like justice." Victoria laughed, low and knowing. "Told you revenge would taste better than whiskey." My lips twitched. "You were right." Another pause. Then, "And Elena?" My grip on the phone tightened slightly. "What about her?" Victoria clicked her tongue. "She's panicking. You saw she pulled out her shares, right? She knows Liam is a sinking ship. And now she's trying to find the next thing to latch onto." I leaned against my desk, jaw tightening. "Let her panic." Victoria hummed approvingly. "Cold. I learned from the best." She laughed again, but there was something softer in it this time. "Well, if you ever want to celebrate." I glanced at my watch. "I'll think about it." After we hung up, I sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. It wasn't just about winning, it was about finishing it. Making sure Liam didn't have a single way out. And for that, there was one more thing to do. I picked up my phone again, dialing another number. This time, it rang longer. I wasn't even sure Liam would answer. But then, a broken voice came through. "Grayson." He sounded wrecked. Completely and utterly destroyed. I didn't speak right away. I let Liam sit in the silence, let him feel the full weight of what was coming. "You know why I'm calling," I finally said, voice low, steady. A shaky breath from the other end. "I didn't know." I let out a dry laugh, no humor in it. "Didn't know what, Liam?" "That lying, stealing, and betraying everyone around you would eventually catch up to you?" Liam swallowed audibly. "The SEC, they're investigating you." "Yeah," I interrupted smoothly, "and once they dig deep enough they'll find everything. Every lie. Every false report. Every piece of fraud you thought you could bury." Liam made a choked sound. "Grayson, man, listen. Please, you don't have to do this." My expression didn't change. "I don't have to, but I am. I'll lose everything." Liam's voice cracked, panic bleeding through. "My house, my money, my life." My smirk returned. "Yeah, you will." Silence. And then, in the quietest, most pitiful voice I had ever heard from him, "I'm sorry." I let the words hang between us. Once, that might have meant something. Once I might have believed it. But now? Now it was meaningless. Now it was just the sound of a man who had been beaten, who had nothing left. "I don't care," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. Another breath, shaky and hollow. Goodbye, Liam. And with that, I hung up. I set the phone down, exhaling slowly, letting the moment wash over me. It was done. It was truly, finally done. Liam Parker was finished. And me? For the first time in a long time I felt free. I sat in my high-rise office, the morning sun casting a golden glow over the city below. The skyline stretched endlessly before me, a reminder of the empire I had built, the control I had reclaimed. My coffee sat untouched on the desk, steam curling lazily into the air. I didn't need caffeine. Not today. Not after the victory I had just claimed. The wreckage of Liam Parker was all over the news. His company had collapsed. His assets frozen. The SEC investigation tightening around his neck like a noose. The business world had turned its back on him, treating him like a cautionary tale. A reminder of what happened to men who thought they were untouchable. I had watched the downfall unfold with cold satisfaction. Every desperate move Liam had made, every failed attempt to claw his way out of the pit had been futile. It had been inevitable. A man like Liam thrived on deception, on the illusion of invincibility. But once that illusion shattered, once the cracks in his carefully constructed facade were exposed, there was nothing left. No allies, no lifelines, no escape. The final reports came in that morning. Parker Industries was officially bankrupt. Liam had filed for Chapter 11, a last-ditch effort to salvage what little remained. But it wouldn't be enough. The lawsuits were piling up, creditors demanding repayment he couldn't provide. And worst of all, the criminal charges were looming. The SEC had enough evidence to make an example out of him, to ensure that his name wouldn't just be tarnished in business circles, it would be a stain in financial history. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment settle over me. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about balance, justice. Making sure that the man who had once looked me in the eye, and betrayed me without hesitation, would now spend every waking moment regretting that decision. And now, there was only one final piece left in this game. Elena. She had been silent these past few weeks, watching from the sidelines as Liam's world burned. She had distanced herself, pulled out her shares, disappeared from the public eye as if she could erase her involvement, pretend she hadn't gambled everything on the wrong man. But I knew her too well. She wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was waiting, calculating her next move. And right on cue, my phone buzzed. Elena, Grayson, please, can we talk? I let the message sit there, unread, for a long moment. Then, I responded. Grandview Cafe. 7 p.m. Don't be late. The moment I sent it, I knew she would come. She needed to. When I arrived at the cafe that evening, she was already there, sitting at a corner booth. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her posture tense. She looked different. The effortless glow she once carried was gone, replaced by something more fragile. The carefully curated appearance, the subtle yet calculated beauty that had always been part of her charm, now seemed forced. She was trying to look put together, but I could see it in her eyes. She was unraveling. She looked up as I approached, offering a hesitant smile. Grayson. I slid into the seat across from her, expression unreadable. Elena. A beat of silence. Then, she let out a slow breath. I don't even know where to start. I tilted my head slightly. Start with the truth. She flinched, just barely, but I caught it. She swallowed, glancing down at her hands. I made a mistake. I let out a quiet chuckle, shaking my head. That's putting it mildly. Her gaze snapped back up to mine, desperate now. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed everything we had. But She exhaled sharply, struggling for words. I thought Liam was the right choice. I thought. She trailed off, shaking her head. I was wrong. I leaned back, studying her. There was a time when hearing those words might have mattered, when they might have cracked through my armor. But now? Now they felt hollow. Wrong, I repeated, my voice calm, detached. You weren't wrong, Elena. You made a choice. And you live with it. She swallowed hard. I didn't know Liam would fall apart. I finished for her, smirking. Lose everything? Get exposed as a fraud? I tilted my head. If he was still winning, would we be having this conversation? Her face paled. I chuckled, taking a sip of my coffee. That's what I thought. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No anger. Just indifference. I miss you, she whispered. I set my cup down, looking her in the eye. No, you miss security. You miss stability. You miss the life you threw away. I blinked rapidly, shaking my head. That's not true. It is, I interrupted smoothly. And that's fine. You made your bed, Elena. Now lie in it. She reached for my hand then, a last-ditch effort, her fingers grazing against mine. Grayson, please, I just want to fix this. I didn't move, didn't react. Then, slowly, I pulled my hand back, resting it on my lap. There's nothing to fix. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but I didn't waver. For the first time since this all began, I realized something. I wasn't just winning. I was free. I stood, adjusting my jacket, tossing a few bills onto the table. Take care, Elena. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. And then, just like she had walked out on me months ago, I turned my back and walked away. As I stepped onto the bustling street, the weight that had once pressed against my chest was gone. No more heartbreak. No more anger. Just the quiet certainty that I had come out of this stronger. My phone buzzed again. A message from Victoria. Victoria? Dinner? Drinks? A toast to victory? I smirked. I'll meet you in an hour. And as I walked down the street, disappearing into the city lights, one thing was clear. I wasn't the man Elena had left behind. I was something else entirely. And damn, it felt good. You've seen how the lies unraveled, how the truth shattered trust, and how the ultimate revenge was delivered. But here's the question. What would you have done? Would you have taken it further, or walked away? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because next time, the story will be even more shocking, even more gripping, and you won't want to miss a single twist. Trust is a fragile thing once broken. It rarely mends the same way. My story is a lesson for every American. Loyalty should never be blind, and betrayal should never go unanswered. In life, people will lie, cheat, and take advantage of your kindness if you let them. But power isn't in revenge, it's in reclaiming control, in knowing when to cut toxic ties and build something stronger. Whether in business, relationships, or personal growth, the key to survival is never letting someone else define your worth. Walk away when necessary. Rise above the wreckage, and never let betrayal break you.